Good morning, everyone. You are most welcome. I'm pleased to welcome you here at the end of the second episode, the Arab SP Campus Clinic, Bridging Social Protection, Humanitarian, and Labor Market Policies. Today's session is very special because it is labeled as a clinic. We've decided for this because we wanted to be an open discussion. We raise topics that you've identified through a previous poll, and we've decided for two topics for today's clinic. We will focus on challenges away from stereotypes. We will address issues that we encounter in the social protection field. The objective is to move from theory to looking for practical and tangible solutions. We are pleased to have with us subject matter experts, and I call you for interactive sessions through questions and through inputs. I hope we would get a very rich and productive session altogether. Now, I'm pleased to give the floor to my colleague, Shea McLennan, for an opening session, opening remarks. Go ahead, the floor is yours, Shea.
Thanks, Irene. Yes, on behalf of the organizers, myself from the ISSA Secretariat, but also our membership in the region and around the world, and of course our partners in the series, ILO with SP.org. I just want to warmly welcome all of you today, especially to our distinguished speakers who will be introduced shortly, and to you, the growing Compass community, some of you for the first time, and hopefully most of you are welcoming you back. So we're really, really pleased and proud to be jointly presenting this 14th episode of the Arab Social Protection Compass. As this is the season finale this year, I thought it would be appropriate to maybe reflect a bit on the journey of the Compass and how we got to this point. When the first ideas for this series were being discussed, now about 2.5 years ago already, we were aware that something important and interesting was happening in the region. After decades of fragmentation, disconnected and ad hoc agenda setting in social protection, there were clear signs that governments, but also constituents, populations were seeking more. And in some parts of the region, and among, I think, a growing set of diverse actors, there was attention clearly shifting toward more universal conceptualizations of social protection. But I think it's fair to say that there were different understandings of what that meant or what that could mean in practice. And then at the same time, contributory systems, which are a lot of the community that the ISSA is supporting in the region, were confronting long-standing challenges with informality. These were colliding with changes in labor markets. And on that side, we're also taking really important steps toward this greater coherence and greater harmonization in different approaches to coverage extension. And sometimes in the region, and this is especially the case in Oman, in Morocco, in a growing number of other cases, we saw that these dual agendas, so on the contributory side, but also on the non-contributory side, were really coming together. And they were coming together in some cases under much more ambitious and integrated frameworks. So this is what we were observing at the high level. But the concept of integration, I want to really point out, it wasn't something that grew out of some normative starting point. It was more an observation of different variations of these changes that were happening around the region. And because of that, it was deliberately left undefined. And that was precisely so that the concept could be developed and could take shape through the different lived experiences of countries on their paths toward greater coherence, however that is expressed. And so in this forum, this series, we wanted to create a regular space to track and document these changes in the region, also give space for dialogue and peer exchange on the different issues. And so when we fast forward to this episode, number 14, I believe that we have achieved that. So this episode today reflects that spirit very much. The topics, as has been noted, will will feature topics on bridging social protection and labor market policies, social protection and humanitarian policies, and these have been selected by you as part of the Compass community. So they really do reflect those ongoing debates and challenges in the region, but they also then reflect this desire to kind of map out a clear vision for more coherence in these areas. So before handing back to Irene, who's the moderator for the first segment of the clinic, I just want to personally thank the team, and in particular, Dia Sharaf, I'm naming you, for all of the enormous effort that went into planning and coordinating this particular episode, but also throughout the series, and previously Maria Laura Enna, who was really critical to bringing the series and earlier episodes to life, all of the ILO technical specialists throughout the region, Luca Pellerano, Ian Orton, Marielle Fay, Gorsat, all of the different design teams that lent their ideas, but also energy, and it was significant to the different episodes in the series. And of course, to sp.org for the excellent support and logistics, and the team at ISSA for all of their diverse roles. And so I'm very much looking forward to this interactive clinic. It's the first time we've done this kind of a format. So good luck to you all. And with that, I'm handing back to Irene to take us through the first segment. Irene, over to you.
Thank you so much, Shi, for the opening that had helped us get into this session. Before we start the discussion, let us remember some housekeeping points. The session is being recorded. The recordings will be available on socialprotection.org. We will be sharing with you the link immediately after the session. There is simultaneous interpretation available. You can pick up the language that is most convenient. And the Zoom AI also generates automatic captions. To see it, you click in the CC button and you choose the most convenient language. After the introduction and the welcome, we will start the clinic. We will have a Q&A time with our subject matter experts. That's for topic 1. And then topic 2 will be moderated by my colleague, Michele Scala. When we open the floor for Q&A, please mention your name, the organization you belong to, and if you are also addressing the question to a specific speaker, please put your questions in the Q&A segment. No, so it's not in the chat box. You use the chat box to introduce yourselves, but for the questions, it should be in the Q&A box, please, so that we can really track the questions and answer them all. Today, we will discuss the socio-economic inclusion of social assistance beneficiaries through active labor market policies, the training, the intermediation. I mean that the job seekers are to be matched with the employers, and the active labor market policies are really broad. My colleagues will be touching on the Celine Peyron Bista, the Social Protection and Employment Policy Officer at the ILO, Mrs. Amal Mouafid, the ILO Jordan Country Coordinator and Senior Regional Employment Policy Specialist for Arab States, and I'm Irene Selwaness, Associate Professor, Faculty of Economics and Political Science at Cairo University. Let us now move on to the all. So please go ahead and share your answers to the question, your opinions. The question is, what do you believe is the most significant barrier to the successful implementation of ALM PS in your country context? So the active labor market policies is matching job seekers and employers' skills trainings, and it involves as well some other programs. The answers: lack of adequate funding or resources, weak institutional coordination and governance challenges, skills mismatch or insufficient relevant training programs, limited job creation and economic opportunity, stigma or social barriers for program beneficiaries, lack of political will. So you need to pick up one choice, only one answer. Please. Thank you. Um, 40% of the answers are the weak institutional coordination and governance challenges. I totally agree on that, and I can confirm that I do see it in the Egyptian context to a large extent. Yes, the programs might be fragmented or scattered. The entrepreneurship is different from the training, the job seekers matching. And then we also have the limited job creation and economic opportunities coming next, 33%. This is probably more linked to the macro economy. We need to create decent jobs. 0% for the stigma, social barriers. This is very good. This is really positive. And then we have for the lack of political will, 13%, and then 7% for the other answers. The lack of adequate funding or resources, and the skills mismatch or insufficient relevant training programs. So what comes first are the weak institutional coordination and governance challenges, then second, the limited job creation and economic opportunities. Thank you so much. Thank you for your interaction. Let us move now to the questions that we have received from you, and I give the floor now to Mr. Tariq Lakhdar. He will be sharing the first question. We've received a lot of questions, but let's now focus on today's topic. So empowering the assistance program beneficiaries through the active labor market policies. We've received many questions. Now, Mr. Tariq Lakhdar, please introduce yourself and share with us the question. Celine will be given the answer. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for this initiative. I was really following up on the Social Protection Compass series since the beginning. I'll switch to English.
I'll introduce myself. I am Tariq Lakhdar. I'm from the National Social Security Fund of Tunisia. I am at the same time the ISSA liaison officer for the region of North Africa. So concerning today's subject, across many countries in our region, in the Arab region here, we are talking about the Arab region, social assistance programs such as Takaful and Karam in Egypt, Taysir in Morocco, the National Poverty Targeting Program in Lebanon, and Aman Social in Tunisia play a crucial role, an important role in reducing poverty and providing immediate support to vulnerable populations. However, one of the key challenges remains how to move beyond support, income support alone, and ensure that these vulnerable categories can ensure and are able to achieve sustainable socioeconomic inclusion. So in practice, many vulnerable individuals face multiple barriers, as we know, including limited access to employment opportunities, skills development, healthcare, and social insurance coverage, as well as other essential services. So the result here, social assistance can alleviate hardship without necessarily creating pathways towards greater autonomy, resilience, and economic participation. So from the perspective of social protection institutions, there is a growing interest in strengthening the links between social assistance, labor market policies, social assistance, social assurance schemes, and other inclusion measures. This will pave the way that we can raise important questions regarding institutional coordination, targeting mechanisms, digitalization.
Sorry, can you wrap up the question in less than 1 minute, please?
Okay, thank you very much. Just to come back to what I have started, I will finish in a few seconds, don't worry. This raises important questions regarding institution coordination, targeting mechanisms, digitalization, case management approaches, and the role of partnerships with local actors and civil society organizations. Therefore, my question to the expert panel is what mechanisms can be leveraged to make social assistance an effective tool for promoting the socioeconomic inclusion of vulnerable population, particularly in terms of facilitating access to employment, skills development, social insurance, and other opportunities that can support long-term resilience and self-reliance. Thank you very much for your attention. شكرا كثير.
شكرا جزيلا طارق. Thank you very much. And now over to you, Celine.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Irene, and thank you very much, Mr. Lakhdar, for this very interesting question. And actually, you already alluded to some of the answer in your question itself. I think what is important is indeed not to only look at social economic inclusion, but as you said, also to look at how we can progressively move the social assistance beneficiaries into decent, but as you said, also productive and protected employment. And this is where you brought the different institution that needs to play together to achieve this broader objective of entering into the labor market and in decent quality jobs. If we try to organize, as you ask, the different mechanisms, maybe we can organize them by the pull factor or pull mechanism and the push mechanism, maybe looking at what kind of answers can be provided by different institutions. If we look on the side of pull factors to start with, how can we improve the social assistance, the push factor? How can we improve the social assistance program? I think one of them that is very important is to ensure that the social assistance program provides not only income security, but also adequate and predictable benefits to ensure this income security that also help people to anticipate throughout the program and to build their journey towards the return to work. And adequate support also means linking with other social services. You mentioned skills development, but I would like to take a step back and look also at other type of social services that would be needed to support the beneficiary of social assistance program to enter into the labor market. One that comes to my mind first is also having the child care services available, or not only during the period of searching for an employment, but also then returning to work and having these facilities available to facilitate also this transition to the labor market and reorganizing the life around this return to work. I think one other aspect also of the social protection program, part of these push factors, and you already referred to them, is to have services accessible, both the social assistance services as well as other social services, And you mentioned it, we have a great opportunity with digitalization of the social protection institution and system to help accessibility of those services. We know that still in many countries, digitalization will not respond to all the questions. It needs to remain inclusive, and there's still some efforts, and it was showed in the poll, to strengthen the institution and the governance, including by having offices, agencies, delocalized in the different areas of the countries. And then if we look more at the pull factors, on the other side, we have social assistance. On the other side, what can be done from the other systems and the coordination with other systems to also pull those beneficiaries into, as you said, social inclusion, but not only, also returning to decent employment. One aspect that we often tend to forget, because we jump directly into implementation and looking at the barriers and bottleneck when it comes to implementation, is to start by looking whether the legal framework is adapted also for this transition from social assistance to decent employment and social insurance, which means very concretely an example. Does the social insurance law include self-employed, for instance? Because we know that many of self-employed or part-time workers or seasonal workers. We know that this transition into decent, productive jobs will take different steps. And it's important to have the law that supports also this transition. The administrative procedure should also be adapted and facilitate this transition to decent employment and to return to work. We already mentioned the digitalization. But I think one aspect that was also put in the pool and received a lot of response is to have these favorable labor markets that create jobs of quality, decent jobs, and jobs that also tends to be formalized and provide access to social insurance. I think this is very important, and it links to the last question of the poll, the political will. There are choices for the economic model, for the structural transformation, for the macroeconomic policies. There are choices, and it's important that those choices create an environment, an economic environment, and a conducive of job creation, formalization, and decent job creation. So I will stop here, Irene, mindful of time, by just one last word. It's not indeed a trade-off between social assistance and active labor market policy. It's really the complementarity between the two that we're looking at by developing those pull and push mechanisms that will help indeed the beneficiaries to enter into the labor market, but with decent employment. And I'll stop here because I'm sure we will have further opportunities to continue developing on those ideas. Thank you very much, Mr. Lakhdar, again for your question.
Thank you. Just one remark concerning Tunisia's social assistance program.
In 1 minute, please, Mr.
Okay, thank you. Shukran. For our social assistance program, it protects these vulnerable categories, but at the same time, there are elements in this program that prepare these people to move from assistance to social protection. What does it mean? There is initiative that encourage these people to get trainings in certain fields. So in a certain time, they will be able to rely on themselves. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Celine. It is very important to think about the social protection, social assistance, and the social insurance programs as complementary and not contradictory, because that is what we see in the labor market and the region to a large extent, and it affects the incentives. So we need to look into the incentives to alleviate poverty and incentives of both sides should be complementary. Thank you so much, Mr. Tariq and Celine, for the valuable inputs. Let's move now on to the second question that we've identified in the previous poll. I'll read it in English and I will
When
address
integrating
it to Celine.
beneficiaries of economic empowerment projects into insurance protection, should special insurance systems be established for them, or should they be included in the general scheme or the system? Thank you, Celine.
Thank you very much, Irene, for this second question. And indeed, it's a very important one. And maybe I will start with a clear answer and then develop a bit more on why such a clear answer. As an ILO approach, yes, we will encourage to have those beneficiaries included into the general system and not having separate system. And I will try in 3 minutes to argue and convince the audience why it will be the best option. One of them, it's a question of principle, and the second, practicability. Principle is social protection. Fundamental principle are very clear that the social protection systems are here to promote solidarity, risk pooling across the different group of the population, and collective financing. If we keep, even during those transition toward the broader social insurance system, if we keep a population with a higher level of risk together, then inevitably it will increase the cost of the system if we want to ensure its sustainability, or as a trade-off, decrease the level of benefits. And if we're still with these beneficiaries of social assistance transitioning into this unemployment, we're looking at population with risk of having volatile income, not having necessarily sustainable employment when they are in those transition. So what is important is to keep them within the general system to ensure this solidarity and this risk pooling that will also ensure better level of protection. And why is it also important is because the work and the life cycle is not linear. Throughout the life, we move in job. We're moving from self-employment to jobs in formal employment relationship or informal relationship. We're moving from part-time work to other type of work. We're moving from economic sectors to other economic sectors. And this is a practical aspect of it. If we want to ensure continuity of the protection, and if we want to ensure continuity and acquisition of the rights acquired under the different system, the best is to keep the workers under the general system. And this will allow also to have those linear and those careers, and also different life events happening, and making sure that we maintain this level of protection throughout the life and the career. So that will require, of course, also adapting the social insurance system, the general insurance system. I'm not saying that it should be applied and enforced as it is, but this adaptation will look more at first the legal framework, as I said earlier, to make sure that all type of employment or sector of the economy are indeed covered legally as a starting point, but then also adapting in terms of procedure and administration. Very simple examples, and we have more and more of those examples, is the simplification of procedure. Maybe we don't need a full list of documents to apply for registration. That can be simplified. And digitalization, we have example in Cambodia, for instance, a new app that helps the self-employed and the very small enterprises to register. And my second and last point, Irene, is also to look at the financial arrangement. I think it's very important also to adapt the financial architecture to ensure that the contribution to social insurance remain affordable and attractive, And recently, ISSA and ILO released that very interesting publication looking at all different experiences of subsidizing the contribution. And this is really the way to go, not to move directly from non-contributory social protection to fully contributory social insurance, but to have this subsidization throughout the transition period to really help also strengthening, enhancing the position of the beneficiary within the labor market and to help them moving towards higher level of social protection. Thank you very much, Irene.
Thank you so much, Celine. That was brilliant. And wrap up all the the ideas about how to kind of أنا هقلب بالعربي أنا آسفة جدا.
I will speak in English. Very sorry. So this was wonderful. You've talked about the importance of including the social protection assistant holders in the system when they change jobs, because we usually mostly change jobs. And we've also said that it is very important to adapt. Indeed, the flexibility of social protection is very important in order to include the highest number of people and to encourage and to incentivize people to participate in social protection. And now let's move to questions from Amal. So she will be answering some questions that we've prepared. The question is, how can we design active labor market policies in an effective way for vulnerable people to ensure their inclusion in the economy? And are there any examples for successful interventions? So can you give us some examples of successful initiatives that were successful in this field? Thank you, Irene, for this question, and greetings to everyone from Amman. I'm very happy to participate in this session of the Arab Compass in this last session. To answer your question, and very briefly, because we can stay at length to answer this question. But given that we do not have much time, let me start with a very important point. In Arab countries, the problem is not about the lack of programs or policies. We do not have a lack here. And according to some statistics, in 2018 in Jordan, we had 84 interventions or programs related to youth. In 2017 in Egypt, we had 182 interventions on the youth. So this highlights that we do not suffer from a lack, but we do have a problem related to how these policies are designed. Let us focus here on a very important point. Labor policies always focus on vulnerable people, and we always focus on the youth, on women, on people with disabilities. However, here we should start to think differently. We don't need to think of categories. We actually at ILO want to look at restrictions, because the real restrictions are usually different even within the same category. So if I'm, for example, a person with disability, I would face different constraints from someone else in my same category. So what are these constraints or restrictions? We should have pathways that are designed specifically for every group. We should ask people about the obstacles they encounter, and hence start working on overcoming these obstacles. When I mentioned these statistics from Jordan and Egypt about the initiatives of active labor policies, I must say that most of these initiatives focused on one important thing, which was the quantity of trainings or the skills, and also the supply from the labor market. But focusing on one particular point is not enough. Focusing on the trainings only is not enough. And since we're here talking about the most vulnerable categories, we need to ensure complementarity by offering support for stability. So we need to support the stability of people, and we should also link the training. We should link the training to counseling, because we're talking here about vulnerable communities that do not have social protection capital or networks to support them. So how can I offer counsel to these people? And most importantly, when we design any intervention or training, we should link it to the reality of these people and of the labor market. So we try to focus through our experience at ILO on the productive inclusion or the cash plus approach. Thirdly, I would like to speak about something that was mentioned in the poll. In our Arab countries, all the Arab countries, not only in one specific region, we suffer from a weak demand on labor force. So there's a weakness here. So if I organize trainings or an intervention, I must make sure that the private market or entrepreneurs or businesses would be included in the design of a program. Policymakers should not work alone. They should engage the receivers or the recipients of this intervention in the design of this intervention. It is also very important to offer training opportunities and in a way to link the employers to the potential employees. In Jordan, and since I am in Jordan, and since Jordan is one of the biggest host countries of refugees, we have here the Jordan Compact. It was a model that included very sectoral policies and offered job opportunities in different sectors, including for refugees. And as we were mentioning, the weak demand in our region is linked to the lack of economic diversification. Our economies are not enough diversified, and also this leads to a weakness in job creation. This is why we need to work on macroeconomies. It is not enough to talk about active labor policies without linking them to employment-friendly policies. So these sectoral policies should motivate employment so that I would support demand on labor force. Let's not forget as well that industrial policies in many Arab countries have what we call premature deindustrialization. I don't know how to translate that, the speaker says. So there wasn't enough industrial development similar to the way that happened in other countries. We must realize that we have here transformation to economic and digital economy. We're talking here about the importance of linking our policies to new inventions and creations. We should also work on local industrial development and local economy development, because many job opportunities are usually located in capitals and main cities, whereas in rural areas, you won't find much job creation, in addition to the other challenges that I've mentioned. So there are more problems in the rural areas because the most important jobs and opportunities are located in the capitals and big cities. In vulnerable economies, we are always in need of flexibility. And in the crisis-affected countries such as Gaza, Syria, the programs are usually the main cornerstone to offer livelihood for people in the crisis-affected countries. But I cannot work on an intervention without linking it to the other interventions, whether it is related to social protection or employment. So this should be an important entry point. Let me summarize all the ideas that I've said. Policy design is not about increasing the number of programs, not at all. This is not what we call for. However, our systems should be more complementary, more smart, and it should be based on the demand, on real demand, and on the constraints on the ground, and not on the constraints or restrictions that we as policy makers think that are real. And this is why it is very important to have a partnership with all the actors. Thank you, Irene. Thank you very much, Amal. This is a very valuable intervention. Let me comment on one single point related to public employment programs. Yes, it is an entry point, but they should be linked to decent work. And not excessive working hours. So it should be decent work, productive work, and it should be an entry point to the labor point and a basis for later work. Because these programs in many Arab countries do not necessarily offer decent work or durable work that can be durable and rewarding for social protection. So thank you for your intervention. We do not have much time, but still there are a lot of questions. Let me ask Amal a very quick questions. So please answer in 1 or 2 minutes. Please tell us what are the best practices. And of course, as I said, these are questions that we received from the audience, questions that we've collected. So we might have merged several questions in one question. So what are the best practices for me to do some layers or sequencing? So when to merge the public policies with the social protection policies, and so how can I ensure this inclusion or merge in order to ensure income mobility, decent work? So what are the best practices when it comes to project prioritizing? It's a very important question, and I cannot really answer it in 1 or 2 minutes, but I will try as much as possible to give you a very quick framework. So it's very important to deal with labor market policies as policies that do not work in isolation. So we need to have complementary pathways, whether it comes to social protection or employment. Some countries are very lucky because they have, the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs is combined in one single ministry. But sometimes these two ministries are separated, and this makes it more difficult to ensure this complementarity. But we, as ILO, focus on the most important objective, which is moving people from vulnerability to decent and formal work through an interrelated path of phases. So first, we need to offer support, not as a temporary support, but a system that would allow people to have stability, to think of investment of their skills in the labor market. This should be an individual and personal decision, and it should take into consideration the risk, the ability to support risks. So then we move to another phase, which is the activation. In this phase, we need to conduct a profiling on an individual basis so that we can have pathways and offer offer counseling. And we need to have individual plans, because what is convenient for Amal might not necessarily be convenient for Celine. So even if we are only 3 women, but to each of us, each of us has different entry points. Also, public services are vital, and we need to work more on these services, and we need to link them to social protection programs. Afterwards, we reach in the insertion or inclusion in the labor market. So how can I help with placement or wages support or the public employment programs? As ILO, we always focus on the importance of decent work. So even when we work, we do not work on cash for work, we work on what we call employment intensive investment to make sure that we offer decent work based on contracts that ensures social protection. We also ensure occupational safety and health safety and health, occupational health, sorry. And afterward, also we look into public employment programs, because these are cornerstones to ensure the transition. And sometimes also we look into economic empowerment programs, because the pathways we offer should be compatible with people's needs. So there are many choices here. Finally, we speak of empowerment by offering social insurance and social security. And I know that you want to move to the next panel, but maybe Michele can talk more about the Transform program, which is one of the programs that is implemented in the Arab region on the complementary regimes or systems. Thank you, Amal. The organizers are telling me that I'm late, but I do have a question still in the Q&A. Maybe Celine can answer it. So this is a question that we've talked about before, but not in detail. So it is about the role of trade unions. So the representatives of the laborers and workers, what is their role in this transition from social assistance to decent work, and then to social security? So in 1 minute, Celine, please, because we still have a lot of.
No, thanks a lot, Irene, and thanks for giving this question on trade union. I think it's an important one, and in 1 minute, maybe 3 points. The first one, indeed, trade unions have an important role in engaging in the social dialogue for the design, but not only the design, but also the implementation. And in the ILO text, we're really keen in ensuring also their role in the governance structure of the different social protection system, as well as for Amal, also on the active labor market policy, public employment services. This is very important. The second point is trade union can also play an important role in the implementation, themselves supporting the social security institution in registering their workers, collecting contribution, providing information, supporting the appealing mechanism as well. And we have a lot of examples that unfortunately we don't have time. We'll continue putting in the chat. And third, because that's maybe my last message, we heard this morning in this discussion that social protection LMPs cannot be taken in isolation. Amar said it has to be seen as also part of a broader formalization strategy, economic development plans of the country, looking also at those different transitions of the labor market. Digitalization is also putting pressure on the labor market. So trade unions also play an important role in deciding on the economic development choices, macroeconomic fiscal choices. So it's important also to get them engaged with ministries of economies, finance, to ensure that the investments and the resources go into the social policies that we need to facilitate those transitions. And I will stop here, although we could have continued discussing a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't want to finish with this clinic. I feel that these topics are really interested and the contributions are very valuable. But we do have a second topic with my colleague Michele Scala, and it's also very important. So according to me, the main takeaway of this topic is about designing labor market policies in a way that should be part and parcel of a strong economic development policies, a process that would allow decent work opportunities for everyone. And my second point is, it's very important when designing these policies to design them to overcome the restrictions. They should be based on, we should understand what are the restrictions of every category. There was a question on childcare or unpaid care work, but we didn't have time to answer it. Thank you very much to my colleagues, Celine and Amal. And thank you also socialprotection.org, ISSA, for inviting me and for organizing this clinic. And we do need many more clinics because there are still many topics that we need to benefit from. And we need to benefit from your experiences to ensure the interest of all peoples in the region. Thank you very much. And now the floor is for my colleague, Michele Scala. Hello, everyone. I would like to start by greeting you, and I would like to thank our colleagues or the first panel. That was wonderful, and you finished on time, so thank you very much for that as well. The second topic today will be held in English, so let me start with English.
So I have the real privilege to moderate this session along with our estimate colleagues Rim Noor and Valentina Barca. Rim Noor is the technical expert in social protection for the ILO. Valentina Barca is an independent expert and technical lead for the high-level panel on social protection in fragile and conflict settings. Let me also introduce myself. I am Michele Scala. I am the Knowledge Manager Coordinator for the ILO Stream program, and I was previously leading the social protection portfolio of the ILO in the state of Palestine. Let me firstly maybe say a couple of words on why this topic we are going to delve into, meaning ways and manners to strengthen the interlinkages between humanitarian assistance and social protection is really a key one to progressively shape social protection systems in the region. Let's just recall that about 30% of the population is covered in the Arab region, which positions the Arab region as just before the African region in terms of coverage, and half of this coverage is provided through social assistance provisions by national systems. On the other hand, we have, of course, important breakthrough in terms of strengthening and even developing social insurance schemes in the region, especially during the last few years. But another key pillar of the protection that is provided to those that have the right to be protected and that are in need amidst shocks and during their life cycle is that provided by humanitarian assistance, specifically cash and voucher assistance. Linking those two pillars is a key building block to progressively shape social protection floors, right? So They work like two sides of same coin, two structural pillars of current service provision that we have in the region. And so understanding how to coordinate that better, how to make those linkages is really key. To discuss this, we will have Irene Noor and Valentina Barca. They both bring an extensive and outstanding lead, technical lead for the discussion at the regional level. To kickstart our discussion, let me start a poll about that you can vote for, that from the following list that will pop up on your screens right now, which are the 2-3 institutional operational bottlenecks that you find most challenging in coordinating humanitarian aid and social protection. Please take the time to respond to this poll. Meanwhile, we will start the discussion by asking one of our audience to ask the first question. So I would like to ask Rahul Mitra to take the floor to ask directly one of the questions that were pre-selected ahead of this webinar. Please, Rahul, the floor is yours. Colleagues, do we have Rahul
Yes.
online? Yes, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for giving me this opportunity to ask this question. Greetings from Jordan. This is Rahul Mitra. I am the Global Advisor for Economic Recovery at the Danish Refugee Council. And I would greatly benefit from hearing from the panelists if you could share some concrete ways of linking humanitarian assistance and social protection in a way that actually contributes to strengthening inclusive social protection mechanisms, right? So we often talk about this linkage space and also this strengthening space, but I can imagine that there could be a space sort of in the middle where the linking of the humanitarian assistance and social protection apparatuses could actually lead to that strengthening, right? My work at the Danish Refugee Council really relates with displacement-affected communities, so refugees, IDPs, migrants, as well as the host communities. And I'm particularly interested in inclusion of displacement-affected individuals. So if you could share examples from these Arab regions that have inclusionary policy for refugees and other displacement-affected communities, that would be really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul, for being very quick with your question, but also very detailed. To answer this question, I'd ask Irene Noor to take the floor, please. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, Valentina, over to you, sorry.
Yeah, no, we'd agreed to this one. I would be addressing Michele. So,
oh, okay, nice to know.
Yeah, no.
Please go ahead, no problem.
Brim, if you're okay with
sure.
that. Yes.
Sure.
Okay, great. So I think, I mean, as in the session before, you've slightly answered the question in the way that I would also suggest to answer that, yes, in the process of linking, if we're doing this well, is inherently enhancing inclusiveness of systems. And when I say doing this well, I mean actually basing it on a systematic assessment of what systems currently look like and what their current gaps are. So if we think even of just the key dimensions of the collective outcomes that we're trying to achieve in common, so have kind of greater coverage of populations that is informed by the types of life cycle risks, but also kind of risks and shocks that they're typically facing. Humanitarians can play a big role in making sure that we're covering the right people, that we're not just looking at poverty or life cycle risks, but we're also looking at kind of other forms of vulnerability and deprivation, including kind of the nutrition angle, which can be really crucial. So kind of including those considerations when we're looking at targeting. Disability, often as a consequence of certain types of shocks, definitely conflict in the region. We've seen disability prevalence rates kind of shoot upwards, and the gendered perspective as well. If we're looking at comprehensiveness of programs, the different types of benefits and services that we're providing, obviously, and we've had this encouragement just now in looking at not just the cash assistance, but also the active labour market policies, the social insurance. But again, our humanitarian colleagues can really help us to zone into some of the gaps in existing programming. I'm thinking about some of the the protection type support, the psychosocial support that can be really crucial in crisis conflict as one example. And even in supporting transitions in national systems. So just think of Lebanon and the role of international partners and the humanitarian community in shifting and helping build the consensus for the disability allowance that kind of has been put forward recently. When it comes to adequacy, again, I'm just talking through our pillars. If we think of the progressive realization of social protection, adequacy is another key pillar. Obviously, social protection, people think of it in a very specific way, but the humanitarian angle, understanding minimum expenditure baskets, the nutrition angle, addressing complex needs beyond just kind of the core can be helpful in a dialogue with social protection actors, but avoiding getting on a high horse, avoiding saying this is the only way you do this, understanding where social protection people are coming from, what trade-offs they're facing, why they're evaluating things differently. And there's many examples of this. And actually, the fact you mentioned refugee inclusion is a great entry point for me, because that's kind of where some of the most interesting examples are coming. Mauritania is an example that is used a lot, where the data kind of from refugees was integrated into the National Social Registry. But that is only part of the picture, because in order to do that, that's sort of a kind of technical fix. But in order to do that, the background work is at policy level, it's at legal level, it's making the economic case for inclusion, it's seeing how financing can be kind of accessed internationally, but then channeled nationally for those populations to be included in national systems. So again, it's looking at all those entry points systematically, and we'll come back to this later. Many other examples on this. So even countries with very open policies, kind of Brazil has access to social protection to non-nationals embedded in its constitution, but still the de facto barriers are huge at the border, let's say with Venezuela in the displacement crisis. So the support that the humanitarian actors played in facilitating access, the translation services, the kind of support to registration, helping to get the right ID documents to enter the national systems is crucial. So you're kind of seeing the message here. We have other kind of nice examples which aren't specifically linked to refugees. The Afford program in East Africa trained older citizens monitoring groups to track and advocate for older people's access to existing programs. In the Kurdistan region of Iraq, government social workers are referring people in need to civil society organizations support, so kind of a reverse referral in a sense, kind of so because of a missing national systems. One last pitch is that this can also happen at a bit of a meta level. So instead of a humanitarian organization doing a data privacy impact assessment and then using it for its own purposes, using the insights from that and kind of making sure that it informs changes to national systems so that data protection and privacy are taken more seriously will have big kind of inclusion benefits down the line. So again, it's just always thinking what I would be doing anyway, how can I be strengthening the systems that are there to support people in the medium to long term? Over.
Thank you, Raul, for your question, and Valentina for the many, options that you gave us in order to look into inclusivity and comprehensiveness in the same time, right? Also as equal important items of a same approach to social protection and linking that, of course, to humanitarian assistance. So for the second question that we received and we pre-selected ahead of this session, we have the following one. What are ways of linking humanitarian assistance and social protection that also strengthens inclusive social protection mechanisms? I think part of it has already been responded during Valentina's intervention, but perhaps Rim, you would like to take the floor and answer to that as well?
Yeah, thank you, Michele. I think that's the question that Rahul just asked, but maybe I can comment on sort of the institutional challenges and practical challenges that sort of hinder this, the coordination between the social protection system and humanitarian assistance, including sort of the issue of inclusivity that the first question has alluded to. So I think I mean, I think everybody agrees that coordination is important between humanitarian assistance and social assistance, social protection in general. The challenge is sort of how to make it work in practice. And I see a few main reasons why this is a challenge. The first is that obviously humanitarian assistance and social protection systems are often designed for different purposes. Obviously, the humanitarian assistance is designed to move quickly and respond to urgent needs and sort of save lives, while social protection systems are designed more to provide predictable, state-led, state-owned, and sustainable protection over time, meaning over the life cycle risks. However, when crises become more protracted, which is often the case, or which is the case in many of the countries in the Arab region, and as well as in some other regions, so obviously that makes coordination there a bit more difficult. The second challenge that I see is that humanitarian assistance and social protection are often managed by different institutions and therefore create fragmentation. Even within the social protection system, obviously, you have programs and schemes managed by ministries of labor, ministries of social welfare, sometimes ministries of finance, sometimes local authorities. So that creates an initial layer of challenges. Another maybe challenge is what some of the colleagues have alluded to, including Valentina earlier, is around the data and the delivery systems. So social protection registries, where they exist, may not include, in fact, those groups that need to be included. For instance, informal workers, refugees and displaced people, persons with disabilities, or people without documentation. But at the same time, humanitarian actors often collect valuable data. However, that is not interoperable, is not able to exchange information with social protection systems. And of course, there are legitimate concerns around privacy and data protection in some of these contexts. And the challenge, of course, here goes beyond data. Even when people are identified correctly, delivery systems may not be ready to reach them quickly and safely. Payment systems may not cover certain areas. IDs, and we've seen this more recently in Gaza. Social workers and case managers may be overstretched by the increased caseload. So coordination with weak systems is sometimes not optimal in that sense. The next challenge, of course, across the board is financing, but in particular between humanitarian financing and social protection financing, there is obviously structural differences. Humanitarian financing is often or still, despite many advocacy efforts, short-term and donor-funded, while social protection requires more predictable and sustainable financing. And even when we talk, for example, about risk financing, it's still, there is still a discrepancy between the financing mechanisms that are there for humanitarian interventions and those for more predictable social protection schemes. And when countries in particular face repeated crises, which is unfortunately happening in the region, there is the risk that emergency funding becomes the primary source of protection rather than an entry point into stronger national system building. Lebanon, for example, I think Amal alluded to this earlier, is a useful example of many of these challenges that come together there, where the humanitarian programs have been essential for vulnerable households and refugees, while national social protection systems that exist remain fragmented and under pressure from economic and fiscal crisis. So it shows how difficult it can be to move from emergency assistance to more sustainable forms of protection. Although I think that the program that was mentioned also by Valentina, there is an emerging good practice when it comes to the National Disability Allowance, which is again an emerging program that is does not cover all persons with disabilities, but is getting there in terms of more sustainable financing and more sustainable systems. The final challenge the coordinating between the humanitarian system and the social protection system will sort of simply reproduce the same exclusion. So this is especially important from ILO perspective, for example, in the so-called missing middle. So the people who are not poor enough or visible enough for social assistance, and those who are not formal enough for social insurance. And this brings me maybe to the specific case of displacement, because also displacement often sits at the intersection of these challenges. One of the biggest challenges in the nations sort of fall between humanitarian assistance and national social protection systems. Humanitarian programs may reach them during emergencies, but they often remain outside of national social assistance and, of course, social insurance systems in the longer term. And we know that on average, I don't know the specific details for the MENA region, but on average, I think refugees remain displaced for an average of 20 years. Internally displaced people remain displaced for an average of 10 years. So this is obviously not an emergency response anymore. This is a long-term issue. And given this protected context, again, from ILO perspective, the question is not only how displaced people receive social assistance or receive assistance today, it is also how they can progressively access social protection across the life cycle, first of all, access decent jobs, meaning jobs with social protection and other forms of protection, of course, where national frameworks allow. And going back to the discussion, the first discussion about linkages, this cash plus dichotomy, I guess. This is an area where ILO has done quite a bit of work in recent years, together with UNHCR, for example. The ILO has supported countries in looking at how refugees can be included in national social protection systems, rather than relying sort of indefinitely on parallel humanitarian programs. And a lot of this work has focused or has had as an entry point social health protection, because access to healthcare is a more immediate and practical entry point. After these sort of years of experience, I think that the lesson learned here is not to address the refugees or internally displaced people as a specific group. Again, going back to something that Celine has said earlier, but to really embed this coverage extension into a broader policy of including these vulnerable groups, including informal workers, including underserved groups in general. So not specifically targeted at a specific target group, but more in a broader sense where these groups are pulled in into these, are included into these systems. And I think,
sorry,
yeah.
I will have to ask you to wrap up, please.
Yeah, of course. So I think, the way forward is really to align the building blocks of the response where possible, in terms of delivery systems, in terms of financing, in terms of coverage extension. However, obviously, it means that sometimes, if we're honest, integration and coordination is not always possible and appropriate in some of the context. And ultimately, I would say the goal is not coordination, it's on its own sake. The goal is to make sure that each crisis response leaves people with better protection than before and leaves systems stronger than before. Thanks, Michele, and sorry for being late. Over to you.
No, thank you, because you really wrapped up on many important items that we're trying to discuss under this session. So we'll have the opportunity to also provide more details. My next question will go to Valentina, because we just seen coordination between humanitarian actors and social protection systems is not always easy, right? Especially in crisis contexts. Sometimes it might even not be the optimal solution. We have also seen some difficulties in how to operationalize that in practice, even if we put it at the top of our agenda, that coordination, right? We have also seen some of the most persistent structural barriers to effective coordination. But can you now point to a couple of examples, perhaps, where coordination worked well and that actually produced tangible results in terms of assistance to people on the ground? Thanks.
Yes. So RIM gave us a sense of what it is we should be coordinating and at what levels. And kind of let's remember, coordination is not just two people in a room shaking hands. It's kind of making sure that systems are actually kind of aligning, and that especially the short-term systems are looking at what the long-term vision is and kind of trying to enforce that over time. And I'll be basically drawing on two resources which I put in the chat, where you can find plenty more examples. I'm going to just give you a kind of snapshot. There's some examples which are very broadly documented and I think very widely known. So the process in Turkey with the ESSN, where there was partly because of a huge amount of humanitarian funding and also very strong national systems, kind of a very strong focus on leveraging the national systems that were there and reinforcing them in the process. More recently, we have Ukraine with quite a similar setup, very strong social protection systems. It's the first time I speak to any humanitarian who's worked in Ukraine becomes a social protection convert, because they understand the value of kind of existing systems and working on what's already there, even though let's remember that in the short term, coordination was actually very complex, and donors had to actually specifically finance and push for coordination between the sectors to be happening de facto through what we now know as the Preparedness initiative, which worked over the course of a couple of years very extensively to be kind of conducting comprehensive assessments of what systems were there at every level. So let's take what legal frameworks are kind of enforcing social protection in the country, and how can we be strengthening those and abiding by those in the creation of our humanitarian programming. How does registration work? How do data systems work? And how can we be reinforcing at every single level? Less known is the Brazil case that I just cited before, the Colombia, kind of very similar, the kind of creation of an adaptive social protection roundtable across humanitarian and development actors. It meant that humanitarian actors, instead of working in a silo, were supporting registration of the Venezuelan populations and feeding those international systems and kind of having complementary support. The Palestine case is an interesting one because despite lots of complexities, partly kind of in the aftermath of October 7. But anyway, the social protection CVA technical working group really achieved and continues to kind of play an important role in bringing sectors together that were previously working as total silos and adapting to a very swiftly changing context, but with a kind of a common objective in mind, which is the strengthening of social protection systems. And obviously that isn't always easy. We've seen, for example, the role played by our colleague Carla Lacerda in the data sharing argument, where national data had been shared with humanitarian actors and wasn't being shared back with national systems, and trying to shift from risk aversion to risk mitigation in that process. It's a lengthy trust building complex process where we need to be investing. And that's why kind of a common feature we see is donor investment in the coordination itself. Ethiopia with its strategic advisory group, Sahel with its twin track approach with UNICEF and WFP are just other examples. If I can just close with one last minute, kind of let's remember in the background of this is that all of the global legal framings are asking us to do this. And it's not just on the social protection side, our North Star, which is the social protection standards and resolutions. It's the the document, the UN resolution that sets up OCHA is saying that the state should be playing a primary role. Customary international humanitarian law is reinforcing that. The sphere standards, which for humanitarian actors are kind of another Northern Star in terms of how they operate, are very clear that humanitarian actors should be recognizing the primary role and responsibility of the host state, that they should be supporting that responsibility in that process, that the language in there is very clear. And we have a briefing note coming out on this soon from the high-level panel. The challenge is actually institutionalizing this and making sure that it's recognized within humanitarian architecture de facto. So there's one line currently in the Global Cash Advisory Group terms of reference saying that where feasible and relevant, humanitarians should be aligning to national systems. Our colleague Paul Harvey is now working on a document that actually goes beyond the one-liner saying what should cash working groups do de facto. And I have a lot of hope in that. And if you want to give feedback on that, maybe just reach out to Paul Harvey directly.
Thank you, Valentina. Indeed, I know too well the file on the Palestinian SPCVA TWG. And certainly it runs a bell when it comes to my next question that I will address to Reem about the way in which the current integration between humanitarian assistance and social protection tends to happen, which is rather in response to crisis than in terms of preparedness related approaches. So my next question would be specifically about that. What would be a preparedness-oriented approach actually require in terms of systems, incentives, institutional arrangements? And could you also speak from your respective vantage point, meaning what does it look like from a social protection practitioner perspective, and what does it look like from a humanitarian assistance kind of point of view? Reem, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Michele. I'm just told that my connection is a bit shaky, so I'm going to be turning off my camera, if that's okay with you.
Of course, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, thank you for the question on preparedness. This is obviously at the gist of this discussion and this debate. I think from a social protection perspective, preparedness is obviously not starting from scratch every time there is a crisis, and I think this is the case for all sectors. Obviously, too often we think, and despite working on this for the past, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, we only start thinking about scale up after the shock has already happened, when institutions are under pressure, when options are already limited, and when decisions are sort of already made in that sense. So for me, from a social protection preparedness perspective, for me, there are 4 essentials. First, coverage. So as I was saying earlier, if large groups are excluded in normal times, they will be excluded in crisis too. So in the Arab region, as well as in other regions, and I see there are many colleagues from DRC, from other African countries, this means thinking ahead of the crisis about these groups that need to be included and that need to be covered in routine social protection systems, including informal workers, including refugees and displaced populations, migrant workers, etc. Second, an element of preparedness, which is much more talked about, is operational preparedness and readiness. And this is what is, I think, commonly called shock responsive social protection, meaning that registries, payment systems, social workers, grievance mechanisms, referral pathways need to keep functioning during crisis, so to ensure that there is a business continuity of existing systems and programs, but also be able to expand when demand increases. So preparedness obviously is not just about having the SOPs of knowing what the theory says, but also making sure that these systems are in place and can respond. The third preparedness element is financing. So of course, even the best system cannot scale up if there is no money when the crisis hits. So preparedness means contingency financing or a more sophisticated layered financing strategy, a flexible donor funding, of course, and investing in readiness, not only in response. So investing beforehand in preparedness. And the fourth is the legal framework. Of course, systems need the flexibility to enroll new groups, provide these temporary top-ups or scale-ups, and continue to support people when they are displaced without creating entirely new and parallel systems every time a crisis hits. Jordan is a useful example for this preparedness through coverage expansion through the Istidama++ approach, which is not just about emergency support, but about also making social security more accessible to vulnerable workers, including women, refugees, migrant workers, and workers in smaller enterprises. And this is the kind of investment before the next shock to reduce future dependence on humanitarian cash. I think from the humanitarian cash transfer perspective, this is more for the humanitarian actors to comment on, but I think preparedness also requires maybe a shift in incentives. Of course, there is the operational preparedness, and humanitarian actors bring speed, reach, and operational capacity. But what is also important is that they need to shift to preparedness of making sure that the design of the programs from the beginning are aligned, and that transition to state-led programs are kept in mind. So this is more maybe the preparedness work that I think humanitarian actors can invest in. Of course, how to use national systems when appropriate, coordinating transfer values, sharing data responsibly, of course, and strengthening these other delivery systems. From the social protection side, I think also preparedness requires a shift in mindset. Social protection systems can not only be seen as routine systems for normal times. I think this is a lesson that sort of the social assistance practitioner have already started embedding in the shock response of social protection and adaptive social protection work. But I think this is also the case for social insurance, where we need to build this preparedness ex ante into these systems. And my main point here is that preparedness is often seen as about responding faster during crisis, but I think it should be about making sure that before the next crisis happens, people have stronger protection, there are stronger institutions and stronger resilience than before. Thanks, Michele, over to you.
Thank you, Reem. Really food for thoughts. We now have the results of the poll that we asked you to vote for in the beginning of the session. I'm gonna just read out loud the results. So 80%, so the question was, which 2 to 3 institutional or operational bottlenecks do you find most challenging in coordinating humanitarian aid and social protection? So the most voted with 80% of the votes is lack of common data platforms, interoperability. The second one with 20, oh, sorry. So this is not going to be the second one. All right. So the second one is with 40% of the votes, limited capacity of national institutions, which is very interesting to hear. 27%, no, 33%, sorry, I don't have them in a row. Absence of clear policy frameworks for coordination. Then we have differing mandates and objectives of agencies. And if I'm not wrong, we have a couple at the same scoring, inconsistent funding cycles and mechanisms, and trust issues or political sensitivities. So perhaps, colleagues, you'd like to, to react to that, although, of course, you already touched upon all of these, elements during the discussion. But perhaps a point of attention on the preparedness of national systems and national institutions to actually make that coordination happening. I think this must be coming from humanitarian colleagues, right? This is usually the kind of comment that we have from humanitarian colleagues that feel like there is no preparedness from national partners to actually work towards that coordination. Back to you, colleagues, whoever wants to take the floor. All right, Valentina, please.
No, just to indicate, I will need to leave in 2 minutes. So
all right,
I don't know if you want to quickly cover the question on what guidance exists, or whether we can drop that and have it as an email that goes out after.
Why not? Sure. And perhaps, Rim, you can park this on your side and try to answer to that. So, Valentina, yes, we have spoken about preparedness tools. Element, really factors, frameworks, right? From Rim was mentioning, many of those in terms of preparedness. Now, what about preparedness tools that actually exist? Because there are quite a few that can help us going towards that preparedness work and assessing entry points to social protection systems. Go ahead, please.
So I was just being a bit cheeky, and obviously I was given some of these questions in advance because they'd come from prior sessions in the Compass. And I decided that what would be useful is just try and reorganize. There's a myriad of tools out there, and Rim and ILO colleagues have systematized them into an Excel, and kind of other existing compendiums exist from CALP, for example. But just to give us a sense of what these different tools are doing, I think it's worth visualizing them. So there's the types of tools that are focusing ex ante, kind of for example, incorporating a focus on risks and shocks in our standards assessments. So I'm thinking of, I don't know, the example of in Mozambique, including a focus on resilience to shocks in the multiple overlapping deprivation analysis. But more important is this assessment of social protection systems to see to what extent they're risk informed. And whether we use the word adaptive, risk informed, shock responsive, it doesn't really matter. We're talking about the same thing. And what we've seen over the years is a flourishing of guidance from different institutional actors on this. So UNICEF, WFP, World Bank have all developed their own kind of approaches to this. You might be familiar with the stress testing by the World Bank, which has now been conducted in many countries, but WFP's capacity assessment tool and UNICEF kind of readiness assessment are both really useful, interesting tools. And the work that I've done with Space and Star kind of focuses in a similar direction. They're diagnostics of existing systems, looking systematically. What they have in common is they're looking at each and every dimension of what a social protection system entails and understanding to what extent each and every one of those elements is risk informed and what could be done to be improving. So we can share some of those tools with you. What would be ideal in the future and what's being called upon even by SPIECB is to be doing this together, having coordinated assessments rather than each actor kind of developing their own. Ultimately, we are looking at the same thing, and we could be doing even a kind of across countries, and this has already happened in a few regions. Now, obviously, this kind of assessing the systems and understanding to what extent each element is risk-informed helps us to understand humanitarian entry points. And this is where we have a couple of tools that are focused on identifying entry points and looking at what response analysis can look like based on that. Some are agency specific. So even UNICEF has recently developed a rapid assessment tool to understand whether they should be working by channeling financing through national systems or through their own systems. But at the same time, even if it's through their own systems, enhancing preparedness for national systems in the process. And STAR has developed a useful guidance I'll be sharing. If we're focusing on national systems per se, there's also really interesting experiences, for example, coming from Eastern and Central Europe on using those assessments of social protection systems to develop micro simulations and to develop system strengthening, which is specifically kind of addressing each and every dimension in that solar system in the top right corner. Obviously, what's useful is also the guidance. So there's tools and guidance on how we can be giving strategic clarity to all of this. So how can we make sure we're really hitting on the collective outcomes we're trying to achieve? And there's the collective outcomes document that came out of STAR, and the SPIECB principles and tip sheets are really useful from that perspective. And then I have this kind of last category, which is looking kind of further informing decisions post-shock, but with the social protection angle. So making sure that any needs assessments from PDNAs to agency-specific kind of emergency needs assessment, focusing on social protection kind of as well, kind of understanding what's already there in the process. But I can share the links to all of the actual tools themselves, because that's what will be most helpful to you. Over.
Yes, absolutely. It's very useful to have them come together into a document, because there are indeed quite a few. Some are a bit more heavy than others, and so are more hard to apply during crisis contexts, right? When a crisis is live, while other might be a little bit more tailored to that kind of exercise during the crisis. So I'll go back to Reem to ask her to answer to this question around preparedness of national systems and national institutions to actually provide that kind of coordination infrastructure, and to just take your thoughts around that. And then perhaps we have some time to open the floor to some more questions from the audience before closing. Reem, back to you, please.
Thanks, Michele. Could you come again on the question? Sorry.
Yes, the poll actually mentioned as our second, I think, or third entry among, between the main challenges to make that coordination happening. Yes, thank you for that. Consistent funding. Sorry, I think, yes. Oh my God. I can't find it anymore. Yes, limited capacity of national institutions, all right, in terms of what are the challenges to make that coordination happen. Limited capacity of national institutions. I think this is an interesting kind of voting because, of course, it also expresses, I think, a little bit the kind of vision that practitioners of humanitarian systems might feel when it comes to coordinating with national institutions on national systems, linkages to humanitarian aid related programs.
Yeah.
So would you comment on that, please?
Yes, thank you very much. I think from my perspective, capacity is sort of one of the systems that need to be addressed in terms of how to design and how to deliver and how to monitor social protection and humanitarian assistance in general. So I don't think this is sort of outside of the box of building preparedness of national systems. I think that's part of it. Of course, it's not about saying, like making a blank statement about government lacking capacity, or this is more specific. If we're looking at, for example, using digital tools, does the unit that is in charge of delivering these social assistance or these programs has the capacity to use that specific software or to deliver that specific assistance? So I think this is very specific. If we're talking, for example, about a health scheme, so I don't. For me, this is part of the part of the package of system preparedness. It needs to be addressed both in the design phase when we're building ex ante these programs to build the capacity of the national counterparts. And here we're not only talking about governments, but as we were mentioning earlier, also social partners and local authorities, etc. But also during the crisis and after the crisis to see where the gaps are and how we can improve on making sure that these systems are adequate and are able to also scale when a crisis hits.
Thank you, Reem, for that. So we have a couple of questions coming from the audience, but I'd actually prefer asking the audience to come in, open the mic, and ask the questions yourselves. We have a bit of time. If we can just wrap up a couple of questions now, and give the opportunity to Reem to answer to that, and then perhaps we can conclude because we still have around 8 minutes to go. So I would like to ask Mayasa to please come in, and then Ahmed Izzat Fares to also come in, if Mayasa is still with us. Mayasa, are you there? Probably not. Ahmed Izzat Fares, are you there?
Hello, I've just
Yes,
tried
Mayasa.
to.
Yes,
Oh yes.
hi.
Hello,
Please come in.
hello everyone.
Yes.
Sorry, I just tried to make the right connection.
Sure, no
Thank
problem.
you very much. Of course, I have many points, but
But
I
if you
will
can be
try to
just quick
summarize
and
it
perhaps,
all.
yeah,
Yes.
and perhaps really go to your
Yes.
question because we have not that much time, you know. Thanks.
Yes, my name is Miasa Salihi, of course, executive committee member of the General Union of Workers in Iraq. From the reason that, let us say, it goes for beyond income poverty alone, many individuals and families face multiple and overlapping challenges. But let us just move to the trade union prescriptive. We often see workers and families who are not officially classified as a poor, but they are still highly vulnerable due to the unstable employment. Ultimately, there is effective social, of course, protection should not be a response to the poverty. My question, I will just try to jump to it, is what practical mechanism can ensure the participation of a trade union in identifying the workers and monitoring the effectiveness of the social protection and programs, especially, of course, individual and displacement faced context? Thank you a lot. Though I had many notes, but I know that there's no time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for understanding, Mayasa, and
Thanks.
thank you very much for asking this important question. I just wanted to ask if Ahmed Zat Faris موجود, and if he would like to ask.
Hello?
Yes, please come in, but please, dear Ahmed, please be as quick as you can so that Rima has some time to respond, and then we can close.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to say real quickly that on the vulnerable groups have limited capabilities, and we cannot forget about them. We need to have inclusive programs that achieve both assistance and social protection. And I believe that in the chat, I mentioned an Egyptian example about support to the vulnerable groups, because with one program, we want them to be covered with assistance and protection and the same entity. Thank you. That's all I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Rim, if you can
Irene?
please come in super quickly on these 2 points so that we can conclude. Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Michele and colleagues. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, super. I mean, I think, yeah, thank you very much for both questions. I think both questions are sort of talking about the same issue, which is what happens to the group of people who falls between the cracks between social assistance as seen, especially in humanitarian contexts, and sort of more formalized social protection, especially social insurance. So the first angle, I mean, the second question, I think it was more of a comment than a question, which is really that there is a need to target specifically this group and make sure that there is an intentional effort to make the link to bridge between these 2 programs and sort of to transition also from social assistance to social insurance, to make sure that vulnerable workers and vulnerable groups are targeted, even if they are not necessarily extreme poor or eligible to social assistance based on these poverty measures. The first question is more about the role of social partners in general, in particular trade unions. And I think this is sort of the same answer as in the previous session about ALMPs. I think the trade unions have a very important role to play, both in the design, in the implementation, in communication and outreach and registration of workers. But obviously, there still is this missing middle, or the workers that are not represented, the workers that are sort of either purposefully staying under the radars or just not covered because there is no program to cover them. And I think this is really what I was advocating for earlier in terms of the coordination, in terms of the inclusion, in terms of the preparedness. Is the first line of preparedness is to extend coverage to these groups intentionally. It doesn't mean that one size fits all, that the program that is meant for, I don't know, public sector workers or agricultural workers is the same one that is good for domestic workers or workers in the care economy. So they may need specific design or specific accommodation or sometimes even contribution subsidies. But I think extending coverage to these groups that fall between the cracks, so to speak, and that actually fall into poverty and destitution when a crisis hits and when a crisis is protracted is really important, and of course important to involved in these design and implementation and communication and all of it, and outreach involve social partners, trade unions, workers, organizations, etc. Over to you, Michele.
ثانك يو ريم. بس بدي اسال المترجمين اذا في مجال بس بضلوا دقيقتين زياده تم نروح للخلاصه. So just to conclude, colleagues, first of all, a big thank to Reem, to Valentina, to the socialprotection.org team, to the ISSA, to the ILO for making this possible, for making this session possible, and more broadly to really make this Arab social protection compass a reality and a community of practice, I would say. Just to conclude, we have seen, I mean, how much coordination is needed, and in the same time, sometimes challenging. But in the same time, we have also, we are trickling down a little bit what are the issues there. And by doing that, I think we also understand that this is feasible, this is possible. We have instruments, we have frameworks, we have ideas, we have, the skills to make that happening. And we have examples where this actually happened and worked out well. In terms of concluding, I have the privilege to also conclude this cycle of the Arab Social Protection Compass. So let me just say a few words around that. I think I've been involved in the Arab Social Protection Compass before. I think this has been a great journey, a long one that has spanned goals and objects within the social protection frameworks. We have seen how we can try and support the development of integrated social protection systems, how to support system-wide transition, how to identify emerging vulnerabilities, how to strategize to ensure that coverage of the so-called missing middle can also be ensured, and so many other topics have been also tackled during this journey. Together, they reflect a broader framework, one that speaks about the challenges, but also about the opportunities that are there in our region and that are unfolding while we speak. What we learned, I think, is that even in the most difficult circumstances, as the ones that we have been living during the last years, it is indeed possible to progressively craft social protection system, social protection floors together, and that we will all have to play a role into that. So congratulations to all of you for being part of this community. And again, thank you to the organizers for making this possible. Thank you and all the best.